Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Edward Brown. I'm the Education Director for the Chamber Music Society of Fort Worth. I want to thank you all for being here tonight. It's my great pleasure to help us premiere Learning with the Masters. And before we start, I want to thank the groups that have helped make this happen. First, our very hardworking Board of Directors. Would you all please stand up? And we put together a special advisory committee with Jill Springer, Echo Wilson, Jennifer DeSantis, who's here, Heather Henry, and Andres Franco, who's not here, but was very instrumental. Would you all please stand up? And then I wanted to thank one of the sponsors of this program, which is Arborlawn United Methodist Church, this beautiful church that you see here. Karen Gossett is their music director. She's volunteering to run sound for us in the back. And let's thank her and her staff. They have a wonderful concert series that I hope you all will check out on their website called Concerts at Arborlawn. And finally, I want to thank the Fort Worth Youth Orchestra. I don't think we have many directors here, but we do have one of their musicians, Stuart Young. Stuart Young, will you stand up and represent the Youth Orchestra of Fort Worth? Thank you. Have a seat. And now it's my joy to introduce Gary Levinson, our esteemed artistic director. Let's welcome Gary Levinson.
Thank you very much. I can't tell you how excited I am about this new program. Learning with the Masters has been kind of a brainchild of this education department, myself, and our wonderful committee. And they've worked really hard to bring this event, this initial event, to fore. Before we go on, and let me tell you about my very good friend Andres Cardenes, who I admire very much, I want to remind you about the concert that the Diaz Trio and Gabriela Martinez is going to play. They're going to play tomorrow at the Modern Art Museum of Fort Worth at 2 p.m. Now, the parking will be a little bit difficult, so please arrive early. Those of you who've been coming to concerts this year will know that we have a pre-concert talk with Laurie Shulman at 1:30. I cannot encourage you enough to come to it because it really makes the music so much more enjoyable when you know the background, the kind of background that can't be read in program notes or Googled, if you will. So please come tomorrow, 2 p.m. for the concert, 1:30 for the pre-concert talk. Now, the chamber music and all music indeed, to me, is about relationships. And I've not had a more important relationship in my life than my friendship with Andres Cardenes. He is a tour de force as a violinist, as a conductor, and as a human being. I think you will really enjoy meeting him at this initial Learning with the Masters. Please help me welcome Andres Cardenes. Please. So as you can see,
go ahead and have a seat.
Mr. Cardenes is a very famous violinist. I think that goes without saying. And he plays a very famous violin. But before we get to that, we will talk a little bit about his background, because his background is amazing. In some ways, I think maybe some of the things that unite us is that both Andres and I were born abroad. I was born in the former Soviet Union, and I couldn't be happier to be here. And Mr. Cardenes was born in Cuba. He came here at a very young age, at the age of 3. And his story about how he came here and how he became a world-famous musician that I think is very compelling. Tell us about it.
Well, it's a very long and complicated story, but the short Reader's Digest version is that my parents, my father in particular, came from a very poor background. My grandparents on my father's side were from the Canary Islands. My grandfather came to Cuba when he was 12 years old. He stowed away on a boat, had no idea where the boat was going. He was one of 12 children with no economic future or any chance of really having any kind of life in the Canary Islands. He had very little education, but he hopped a boat and didn't know where he was going. He landed in Cuba. He landed in Havana, and he walked off the boat, and he got a ride into town, and he walked into a carpenter's shed and said, "Can I do something here?" And they said, "Yeah, here's a broom, get to work." And he learned to be a carpenter. He was a very modest man. About 10 years after he arrived in Cuba, he went back to the Canary Islands. He met my grandmother there. They got married. They went back to Cuba, and then my father was born there. And they were very determined, as most parents are, to give their children as much of a good education as possible. They worked very hard to educate my father, even though they themselves were not that educated. And my father also worked very hard at educating himself, and he loved music, he loved ballet, he loved books, and he became a very successful architect. And he married my mother, and I was born in Havana. And then about almost 3 years later, we decided to come to America. My mother's mother was American. She was a product of a broken home. My grandparents were divorced, and my grandfather basically kidnapped my mother. At that time, in 1930-something, the parents, if they split up, the mother automatically got custody. And my grandfather was determined not to let my mother be raised with her mother. So he took her to Cuba, where he was from, and he wound up dropping her off there. She was raised by her aunt and uncle. She met my father, they got married, and they came to America under the sponsorship of a reunited mother team, my mother and her mother, reunited. And we lived in Queens. You know that place, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that the Coming to America? That's right?
Yes, a little bit later.
And so we lived with my grandmother, the three of us. Little did my mother know she was pregnant at the time when we arrived. She got to New York, and pretty quickly she found out she was pregnant, and pretty soon there were four of us living with my grandmother in a one-bedroom apartment in Astoria. And my father tried very hard to get a job in New York and failed to do so for a couple of years. Finally, he landed a job in Los Angeles, and we packed up what little we had and went to Los Angeles, and that's basically my hometown now. But it's a great success story about my parents coming to America, you know, and we know what the American dream is probably better than anybody. You know, we come over here with very little. My parents had $5 in their pocket when they came here, and made a wonderful life, gave us a wonderful life, gave me an opportunity to do what I really wanted to do with my life, and so here I am.
It's such an inspirational story of perseverance.
Well, my parents.
And the power of your family. I think the kind of role models our parents, the kind of parents that you've had, we remember those role models for all of our life. Now, as musicians, we spend countless hours in the practice room, and most people speak about how long we practice. But one of the things I've always admired about you is how well you practice, because you can hear that in the performances. And I wonder if maybe you could share with us not just the practice habits, but who were your idols that ingrained this ability to communicate with the violin in ways that are not just the number of hours you worked?
Well, you know, as I was growing up, it was very important to me to fulfill my relatively modest amount of talent, and I thought that my strong suit as a violinist was my ability to express myself. I think most young people have trouble with that, you know? We can't really do it on a daily basis in school or with girls or whatever, and I felt like, you know, playing the violin was a way for me to kind of not only search who I was, but to express what I was really thinking and feeling all the time. And I felt like I could do it without handcuffs. You know, I felt like I could just do it and not worry about what everybody thought or said. And it was my own personal world. And then my parents were instrumental in trying to get me to understand that the quality of my work was extremely important, that it wasn't just sitting and going through the motions, but rather thinking very deeply about what you were doing all the time. I was very fortunate that once I got to college, I had an incredible teacher, Joseph Gingold, whom Gary has known about for many, many years. And it's funny because Gary has so many of my teacher's qualities, which is why we're such great friends. Even though he didn't study with him, but he embodies so many of the same characteristics and thoughts and kind of the dedication to the art and the craft of playing. But once I met Mr. Gingold, he became not only my teacher and my mentor, but really he was like a spiritual guru, where I didn't do anything without really consulting him or asking him for advice or trying to get as much information as I could from him. I was pretty shameless. I don't know if you know this, Gary. I was shamelessly dedicated to him. My third year in college, I found out there was an apartment that was for rent about 2 doors away from him, and I was determined to get that apartment because I kept thinking if I just bump into him in the parking lot, I could probably learn a few more things outside of my lesson. And then I thought, well, yeah, then maybe I can even give him a ride to school now and then. If I give him a ride, then he'll tell me something in the car on the way there. And so I shamelessly moved in basically next door to him. And I spent many, many, many hours with him outside of the studio. And I had such an incredible experience learning from him about his life and about the history of the violin and the craft of the violin over many, many years. And it was an incredible education, the kind of education that you don't get when you go to college, number one, and you sure as heck don't pay for an education like that. I was just really blessed and very fortunate to have this time with him.
I also think that for the students in the audience, I cannot emphasize enough that being a student is not a passive sport. Mr. Cardenes is able to embody that because he has this unending thirst for knowledge, and he's the most knowledgeable person I know. So he's one of those people that can really be a great inspiration to all of us. I wonder if maybe you would grace us with a little bit of music?
What kind of violin do you play?
I was just talking to Violin backstage. I play a Petrus Guarnerius of Mantua, Italy, made in 1719. And she's going to be 300 years old very soon. I'm planning a big party for her. She'll be 300. She'll be 300 in 5 more years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So as you travel around and play with the all the big orchestras, do you notice that in the United States, do you think people don't appreciate classical music as much? Do you find that the audience varies from Latin America to Asia to the United States?
Well, there's a huge difference, really. You know, it's very difficult to generalize or characterize. I think what you got to keep in mind in the third world, places where there isn't Netflix or, you know, millions of computers at your disposal or whatever, people basically gravitate towards more earthy social events. And so music, art, literature, movies, things like that bring people together much more easily. In America, you know, you have so many choices of things. You know, you can stay at home and see a movie. Before, at least you had to go out. Now you can stay at home, make popcorn at home. You know, it's very difficult to get people out of the house now to come and go to a concert and experience a concert. And I think with the advent of digitized music and music that you can download and it's immediate,
Right.
that also complicates it, because now people have gotten further and further away from the idea that going to a concert is about live music. It's about being in the moment and being in the atmosphere. And you know, it's really no different than somebody like Nick Wallenda crossing the Grand Canyon on a tightrope. People don't realize live performance is just like that. Anything can happen. It's a dangerous profession to be in. And in these professions, things can go wrong. And the human element, the idea that you're an actual human being, that things can happen and you have to think quickly on your feet, or you have an event that changes the course of the concert. I can give you one very good example about something that happened. I was playing in San Antonio, in fact, about 20-some years ago. And I had just finished playing the world premiere of a concerto that was written for me. And I raced across the street to the hotel, changed my clothes because I was very sweaty. And I wanted to come back and hear Shostakovich's Fifth Symphony with my friend Carl St. Clair conducting. And so I came back. I missed a little bit of the first movement, but I managed to get into the audience by the end of the first movement. And all of a sudden, in the middle of the third movement, where there's a very tragic and very painful section, a man started screaming and walking up the middle aisle with these 2 crutches, flailing and screaming his head off. And of course, everybody was so shocked and everything, and we all kind of didn't know what to do. The orchestra ground to a halt. Carl stopped the orchestra, and the guy came up towards the podium and was crying hysterically and very upset. And apparently he was a former member of the San Antonio Symphony who had been fired that day, and he had had some emotional issues for some time. What happened then was one of the great moments of my entire musical career, experiencing it, is seeing a man who was troubled and a man with problems and a man who for a few moments couldn't contain himself anymore, couldn't have any decorum, didn't have the ability to contain his emotions anymore. And they got him out and took him to a psych ward or something. And Carl came out and he said to the audience, he said, you know, you have to take into account that this poor gentleman was probably deeply affected at this very moment in this symphony, because in this symphony right here, this is the moment where Shostakovich is crying out for help. He's screaming He's screaming. The marimba is playing and the violins are playing, and there are these incredible tremolos going, and it's just almost on the verge of hysteria. And it was just ironic and a very moving moment that music could have triggered that in him.
Right.
And that's the human element that you're not experiencing that if you're not at a concert. You know, you can't get that on your stereo at home or on your
Right.
video.
So do you think there's a way to get audiences in America and the first world to make the move back to concerts and concert halls to see the music, or do you think that's something that can't be done?
Of course it can be done. I think, you know, people have to realize that your culture is the culture of a society. It's what makes us a society. You know, it isn't a computer. A computer is not a culture. It's something that you know, basically it simplifies our life in some ways, and it creates shortcuts for a lot of things. You know, when we have to do long division, you just do it like this, right? But culture is something that defines us as human beings, and whatever culture it is, you know, and it doesn't have to be our culture. It could be the African American culture, it could be Chinese culture, whatever it is, you know. A lot of people look down on that and don't realize that that is what makes us human. We have a culture. We have to not only preserve it, but we also have to advance it, and therefore we have contemporary music, and we have advancement in the execution of music. You know, you have electronic music. You've got all kinds of interesting advancements that take place. So I think for people to lose sight of their cultural heritage and what defines us as human beings is something that we have to kind of get back at people with this. We have to remind them. We have to try to convince them to come to a concert, because this is what defines us as people. And we're an educated people. That's another thing. We're a very educated people here in this country, and we have to find a way to reach them, you know. And in marketing, you know, they call it the hook, or they call it the whatever. You know, I'm not into that. You know, I feel in America it's very important to produce. If you have a great product, if you have something that's first rate, people should want to go, and they should want to participate, and they want to be a part of it. And you know, if the Lakers aren't winning in Los Angeles, their fan base goes way down. But man, when they're winning, you can't get a ticket, right? Well, there's a reason for that. There's a reason. If you're a winner, people are interested. If you're not that good, and you don't have a good if you don't have a good product, people aren't going to come to it. Right.
So what made you become interested in playing violin? When did you start?
Well, I was an old man when I started, compared to young people today. I started in the school system when I was 10 years old. I'm a very, very strong and vociferous advocate of the school system music programs. I have been for 35 years. I've spoken numerous times to legislators, and you know, I've spoken to the Capitol in California about cutting the music programs and things like this. And you know, I was very fortunate because I started in elementary school at my with this music program, and it propelled me into my career. Not everybody was into it, but I'm still in touch with a few kids that were in that program. One of them is a very well-known Hollywood composer. His name is Jeff Rona. He's written for about 150 films. And there's another guy named David Silverman, who's a horn player who plays in the studios for all the for a lot of movies and things like that. And you know, so a few of us, and there's an eye doctor.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's an eye guy who's an eye doctor who I recently got back in touch with after many years. And he still plays the clarinet, and he loves it. His brother was also a violinist. And so what did that do for them? It gave them discipline. It gave them focus. It gave them a social quality. It gave them the idea of how to be a good teammate, you know, how to work together with people, how to be a good soldier. Because when you have a conductor, the conductor is the one who tells you what to do and how to do it. And he's the one with the vision and the blueprint. So you learn all these skills playing music at a young age. And with that, it carries you into whatever you want to do in your life. It doesn't matter. You can be an eye doctor, you can be a garbage collector, but you can still be a good one.
Right. So what was your path from that starting point to becoming the success that you are today?
You know, I think a lot of people, I get a lot of people who come to me and play, and they say, well, I decided to become a violinist. And when people decide to become a violinist, it's almost the antithesis of what it really should be, which is music decides whether you're going to be a violinist or not. I mean, I didn't decide to be a violinist.
Right.
It was my calling. It was my calling, and I knew it, and I felt it, and I've known it from the day I ever looked at an instrument or heard music. I knew it was my calling in life. And I didn't really choose it. It chose me, and they put the burden on me to fulfill my talent, and it put the burden on me to learn and to try to make something of myself with it. You know, I mean, you get a seed planted in you, and it's your responsibility to do something with it. And so I think, you know, I made the decision to pursue it with everything I had from the very beginning. I was very fortunate. My parents also were super strict. They were from the old country, you know. It wasn't like we were playing with Gumbies and, you know, we just weren't allowed. You know, we just didn't have that stuff, you know. We didn't play cowboys and Indians at my house. My father one day, when I was about 13 or 12, I said, Dad, I want to have a paper route, just like all my friends. You know, I want to make some money. And my father said, you're never going to have a paper route. You will never have one, because if you're going to make money, you're going to do it playing the violin. And that means you can play for an old folks home, or you can play for ladies club, or you can play for bridge club, or you can play whatever you want. But you're playing violin. You're not doing a paper route, because that isn't going to get you anywhere with your violin playing. And so I can tell you, I'm probably the only weirdo on earth that never made a penny ever outside of my profession.
Wow.
Yeah. And my first big job, believe it or not, I turned professional when I was 12. Wow. I got my first professional permanent gig. Somebody heard me play and had me audition for a conductor in Santa Monica. And he heard me and he hired me on the spot. I was 12 years old. And he put me in the last chair of the second violins, and I played in an orchestra called the Repertoire Chamber Orchestra. And I was making $60 a week when I was 12 years old in 1970. And for those of you that were around in 1970, $60 in those days was a lot of money. And I was thinking, man, I'm going to buy like a new bike every week. But luckily my mother did not let me keep the money. She gave me $5 out of each week that I got paid. I got $5, and she said, you can buy any records you want. So I went and I put together an incredible record collection of great violinists, and that's what I used with my $5, you know, bonus from my parents. You know, I got $5 commission. That was it.
Wow, that's really neat.
Yeah.
So is there a region that you enjoy playing in the most in terms of geography? Like, do you find that crowds in Latin America or in Asia or in the United States are a little more fulfilling to play towards, or? You know,
you never really compare or anything like that, because everybody's so different and everybody's background's so different. The only thing I ever concentrate on is, my teacher told me, he said, you know, every time you play, even if you play for all your friends, your family, and you're playing a concert, you know, 99% of those people never heard you play before. And you owe them something. And so you have to give everything you have every time you play in front of people. Doesn't matter where it is. And I started to develop an attitude that if I played in church, that was Carnegie Hall. Right. And if I played in my high school, that was Carnegie Hall. And so when I actually played in Carnegie Hall, it was like, oh yeah, I've been here. I've been here 1,000 times. I've been here plenty of times. I know exactly what to do here. And it served me well. But I'd have to say that there are audiences that are vocal and demonstrative, you know, that are less, let's say, inhibited or whatever. And I can tell you that, you know, some of the most just jaw-dropping ovations I've received were probably the two most amazing places were in Belgium and in Russia. Those two places, when I've played there, I mean, if you get a 10-minute ovation,
Wow.
for playing, that's pretty extraordinary. 10 minutes is a long time if you're just standing there on the stage without playing and just bowing, and walking on and off. 10 minutes is a long time. And I remember one concert that I played where I played a recital and then I played 4 encores. And, I ran out of pieces to play. I mean, I'd already played a 2.5-hour recital, and I played 4 encores. And,
Wow.
and so I played the 4 encores, and then I just waved to everybody. I said, "That's it. I don't have anything left. Good night." And so I packed up my violin, and I was desperate to get to my hotel and get a drink or something. And I walked out, and there must have been 400 or 500 people standing on the street clapping when I walked out.
Wow.
They were still clapping. And that was just a great feeling because, it's not about feeding your ego or feeding your self-esteem. It felt good to make people happy. It made me feel good to think, gosh, these people, they took a night out of their life to come hear me play. And I hope I gave them their money's worth and then some. And then they were sitting around still waiting for me afterwards, and that just, it makes you feel like, every bit of work that you put in, it means something to somebody. And that's ultra important, because we all have choices. We can, do whatever we want on any given night. But somebody comes to hear you play, and they're giving a night of their life to you, you bring them the goods.
Right.
You gotta bring it home.
Well, thank you for talking with us.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, very nice. And the weather is driving my violin crazy.
You should be in Illinois.
Okay, there are a lot of good things in your playing. A lot of good things. Let's talk about a few things, okay? First of all, we need to get a better sound. Your sound is a little harsh, and sometimes it's not always beautiful, and it's really a couple of simple things that we got to work on. First of all, let's play the opening again. I'll show you a few things. How tall are you? 6'1"?
6'2".
6'2", okay. I'll tell you why I'm asking. Go ahead, play the opening. Go ahead, I'll play the piano part for you. Okay, now, put your right arm up. Okay, look, here's one of the things we got to do, is when you play violin, you got to create space. Imagine if you were singing, yeah, and you were singing like this, yeah? Where would you be? You'd be going here, number one. Visually, people aren't connected to you, and everything is kind of cramped, right? Your shoulders are hunched, yeah? So we have to create space. Here, put your arm up. Yeah, I want you to continue to think about how much room you have here. The minute you start dropping your elbow here and you start playing in the upper half, like this, you don't get a nice sound because you don't have good leverage. Yeah, your elbow's too low and you're at the upper half. Now, the problem is that if you look at the way the bow is built, it's very unfortunate. Because for most of you who don't know this, this is the exact halfway point of the bow. This is the way the bow is distributed in weight. So you can see it's the bottom third is as heavy as the top 2/3 of the bow. So what happens is that if you don't compensate physically and do something to compensate for the lack of weight at the upper half, right? You have the frog, you've got the button, you've got all the silver, you've got all this weight down in the lower half. You need to do something to compensate here. So one of the things you need to do is have a little bit of torque with the right elbow, which means that you've got to kind of get your right hand lower and the elbow just a little higher. Yeah, and see your right hand is full of tension. Oh, so much tension. It should be very malleable, your right hand. You should really be able to move your fingers around and keep your hand very, very flexible, yeah? And you don't need to grip it so hard. You just grasp it. And also you're holding the bow too far down. You should be holding the bow there. Yeah, the third finger should be on the little eyelet here. That's where your third finger should be. You've got your second finger on that thing. So what do you think happens if you have your second finger and you're holding the bow like this? What happens?
You have more weight down here.
You have too much weight. Way too much weight. Yeah? That's one of the reasons why we're having a little trouble, is that you're too far back on the bow, and so you have way too much weight at the frog. Huh? So now, if you were to add this to the equation, the bow is more divided like this, and you really got a problem. Yeah? What you want to do is try to get this evened out a little bit more. Okay? So now, keep that in mind. Let's play the opening and just relax. Relax your body, relax your pecs, make sure that you're breathing well, and create a little space in here. Okay, let's go. Now the other problem is, imagine you're an archer, or you're doing the biathlon, right? You know what the biathlon is? It's where you cross-country ski and then you got to stop. Your heart rate is super high and then you got to shoot at a target. One of the problems here is you've got a moving target. This moving target here, right? You've got this constantly in motion. And so what happens is that this is always scrambling to find the violin, yeah? And you want to keep your contact point, which is this point right here. You see how straight my bow is? And it's parallel to the bridge, and it's quite close to the bridge. Yeah, so when you're doing, and you're moving around, it's like you're trying to chase a moving target all the time. Try to keep your violin still. Relax, relax, relax the right hand. Get your hand up a little further on the bow. Up there, yes. Just malleable here. All right, now let's do it again. Good. The sound is not as harsh, number one, and it's more focused. The sound is more focused. When you're trying to chase down the instrument all the time, it's very difficult to keep the bow straight and have a good contact point, and it needs to always be parallel to the bridge, okay? So now, I could go into a lot of details, which we don't have time. How much time do I have? Just a few more minutes, okay. So one of the things that we can also talk about is the structure, right? So the preludium has its middle section, right? What do you call that middle section?
A verse, I would think.
A verse? Well, there's another word for it. It's called a recitative. You know what a recitative is?
No, that.
A recitative in Rococo, early classical, and in Baroque music is where there's a chord, and then there's text. Yeah. So the singer, generally singers, are saying something, and they'll say something. You know, it's usually kind of a between-scene text, explaining what might be coming up, or gossip with the maid, or something like that. And here, this recitative is going through different keys. Okay, so here we go. Yeah, now each key has a different color, has a different meaning, right? Because if you have a major key, that's happy, isn't it? If a major key is in D major, it's kind of brilliant, isn't it? If it's in F major, what would you say? How would you characterize F major as opposed to D major?
A little more, I would think a little brighter, actually.
No, it'd be less bright because it's in flats and not in sharps. Well, if you think about some F major pieces, right? For instance, Vivaldi Autumn from the Four Seasons, or you have, you know, Beethoven Fifth Sonata. Do you play this one? Right? F major Romance, right? So it's kind of warm, but positive kind of feeling to it. What about E minor? How would you describe E minor?
I feel like it's like kind of. It's kind of moderate, so kind of a little.
I find it a little
section.
edgy. Edgy is what I call it. A little edgy. E minor. So you can see that each key has a certain character. The more flats you play in, the warmer the sound. If you're playing in flat keys and they're minor, they get darker and darker. Yeah? If you're playing in more sharps, they get brighter and brighter, right? D major, then A major, then E major, then B major, right? C sharp major, F sharp major. Yeah? So those are super bright keys. So the idea is that if you could show me in this recitative, if you could tell me what keys we're playing, and what key are we in here?
I feel like I'm.
Not feel. It's not what you feel, it's what it is.
That's true.
What key is it? What key is the piece in?
It's in E.
All right, so there you go. You're in E minor here. Now you have diminished. Diminished is the darkest kind of intervals that you can play on the violin, all right? Then the next section is in diminished, right? So. Yeah, and then you have this one, F major, yeah? And then another diminished, B flat major, A minor, see what I mean? And we're going through all these keys. So if you're just playing them one after another,
As if they sound the same.
they all sound the same, and they shouldn't. Each one has a certain character, you know? It's like genetics. I mean, you've got a gene, you know, you got reddish hair, right? Well, that's a gene. And when you have A minor, that's sort of the genetic material of the harmonic structure. So each gene that you're showing here has to show a certain characteristic, yeah? And I can't just be all one kind of flatlining, you know? So that's something for you to think about. One of the things that in violin playing is a big problem is that, or most orchestral instruments actually, is that you're only playing one line. You're playing your line, so you only see your line. And a pianist is playing more vertically, you see? And a pianist is seeing all the harmonic structures. They're playing the left hand, it could be an inversion, it could be a certain progression, it could be a kind of a, you know, set of steps towards a certain tonality. And the pianist can see it very clearly. The violinist can't. So that means you got to do two things. One, look at the piano part, so you know what key you're playing in all the time. And number two, you got to listen. You got to really train your ear to hear what key you're playing in. Yeah, because you don't really need to look. I don't really need to listen or look at the piano part. I can hear it, and I can see what the chords are, and that's very important. So that what you're conveying to your audience is an understanding of how these progressions work and what each key means to you. Yeah, so it's not just ordinary. All right, now let's do the allegro part. Yeah, can I ask you where you get that little mordant?
That was just an add-on. No.
I don't think so. Do you think your mother would like it if you added a tattoo over here on your face right now? I don't think it's a good idea. try to play what the composer wrote. Yeah. Here we go. Yeah. We consistently miss that D sharp. Make sure that D sharp is super high. It's with the fourth finger. Right, yeah. And then here, be careful not to get too high. Why don't you want to get too high here? What will happen if you go?
It'll just bounce too much.
It bounces too much and it's hard to control it. So, with all these string crossings, you're string crossing on every note. Every note is a string crossing. It gets much more difficult to control it. So you want to make sure that, yeah, let's try that. Yeah, don't bounce it too much. A little more sideways motion to it. Yeah, and now do it. Elbows too low. Relax your hand. Don't chase it down. And relax. Here we go. Yeah, it's very important that when you do these kinds of things, it's like a gyroscope. You have to repeat, you know, it's like a golf swing. Do you play golf?
A little.
Yeah, so you know what's hard about golf, right? It's repeating a swing that works. Yeah, and so this is the same thing. You've got a swing going here, and you have to be able to repeat that swing. Just do the E minor like that. Shows a little promise there when you do it right, yeah? You see? It's already getting better. You can see it's already getting better. But I'm telling you, the minute you start doing this, and you're doing some break dancing here with the left hand, it gets complicated because you got to be chasing down your instrument. You know, I know it's very popular. There are a few people out there that are jumping around like a bunch of jackrabbits when they play the violin, and it's very impressive. And it looks like they're really trying hard, and it looks like it's very impressive. And I'm not too impressed usually because, you know, it's like going to a NASCAR race when they're playing, you know, because they start and they go like this. This is what you hear on the audio. This is what you hear out there because they're moving around all the time. Yeah? Mm-hmm. So you don't want to move around. You want to just stay still And you want to be focused and disciplined and relaxed here. Violin. Is your teacher here?
Well, my original teacher.
Your original teacher. Good. You got to keep an eye on this wrist. He's really super tight. And he's got to just relax that wrist and let it be malleable. That's all he's got to do. Just, you know, the one thing I kind of always try to tell people is when you use words, it can have a huge influence on how you do things physically. So if I said, I don't like the way you hold the bow, I try not to say the word hold in this particular case, because if you think about holding something, it's like you got to make sure it doesn't drop. I'd rather say when you grasp the bow, grasp it. Does that have a little bit less,
Yes.
right? The word grasp is a little bit less aggressive than hold. Yeah? So grasp the bow. Yeah? Just hold it in your hand so that it doesn't fall out. But it's not like you're holding a 5-gallon jug. You know what I mean? And it's full. It shouldn't feel that way. You should feel like it's, unless you have some moonshine or something at home. I don't know. Maybe. Yeah? But let it be nice and easy. Only hold what you need to make it work. Nothing more. Okay? Okay, now let's do something. Who's got a watch I can borrow? Oh, no, I don't need a watch. I forgot. You know, nowadays with cell phones, you can do anything. You know, you can practically comes with a stove nowadays. We're going to try something here which will help you tremendously. Okay? We're going to do a little exercise here. Okay, that's all I'm going to need. Let me see if I can find my... Here we go. All right. I want you to play in third position, a D natural. Okay, third position, D natural on the A string. Third position, yes, that's right. Okay, here's the bad news. I need 1 minute. One bow, 1 minute. Everybody ready? Here we go. 3, 2, 1, start. Well, that's a minute on Mars, I think, or something, right? I want a minute, my friend. Let's do it again. I want you to think, what do you think you need to do to make that happen?
I feel like I need to be a little more loose and...
Yeah, that's an understatement. You got to be very relaxed, and you have to be like Zen-like. You have to be Zen-like. You have to be extremely calm, extremely focused. All right, can you do that? Like a Tai Chi master. That's what this is. Ready? 3, 2, 1, go. Breathe, relax. With that. All right, well, you got 30 seconds, which was actually almost double your previous time. Let's do one more. Yeah, you see, when you hold your bow and you're doing all of this kind of stuff, that's like some kind of contortionist. Hold your bow normally, relax. The whole point of this is to get you to play the way you normally play, but without doing all that stuff, all that, you have to be relaxed. You want to talk to me while we're doing this? I can talk to you if you like.
Oh. I'm just paying attention. I mean, like, this is very interesting. I see how the exercise works. I think this will help me a lot. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, this is how you have to, this is going to help your situation here, because you're just a bundle of nerves, you know, and you're super tight. If you can get a minute here, you can be a different violinist, and I won't even charge you for it. Let's try it again. One more time. One more minute. Come on, let's take him on. All right, ready? 3. What are you going to do? Think, relax, calm, breathe. Get your shoulders down. Yeah, not your elbow, your shoulders. You were like this. Keep your shoulders down. If you're breathing, let it out. Ready? 3, 2, 1, go. Don't worry about what it sounds like. Just make it work. You're at 9. It's 15. Get your hand the way it should be. Relax. 30. Keep a straight bow. Your bow's crooked. Come on, give me some sound. All right, not bad. 45. If I'm not mistaken, that's like a 150% return or improvement in about 4 minutes. Boy, if my stocks could do that, I'd be very happy. Yeah, but you see what you got to do here? You've got to learn how to, you know, playing violin. Mr. Heifetz, the great Jascha Heifetz said, to be a great violinist, you only need to be able to do 3 things. 1 is have the stamina of a nightclub owner. 2, the concentration of a Buddhist monk. And 3 is the nerves of a bullfighter. Yeah? Now you put those together, that's what you got to do. Okay? You can take that home and work on all of that. The bullfighting too, if you like. All right, very good. Thank you. lovely.
Thank you.
I think, first of all, one of the things that I think will be very interesting is tell everybody about Ferdinand David.
Well,
He's the composer of this work.
Ferdinand David wasn't a bassoon player. He actually wrote a lot of trombone work during his time, and he played a lot of violin with the orchestras. But he took this time to write this piece for bassoon, a great piece of work, and I don't know, I really like it very, very much. So,
Well, you're very much on top of it. Ferdinand David, I'll go a little farther than that. It's funny that he's playing this for me. Ferdinand David didn't just play violin quite a bit. He was the concertmaster of the Leipzig Gewandhaus Orchestra, number one. Number two, he was a concertmaster for a man named Felix Mendelssohn. And number three, Felix Mendelssohn wrote his violin concerto for Ferdinand David. So the famous Mendelssohn concerto was premiered and dedicated to Ferdinand David. Not only that, but Ferdinand David also was the person who did the first edit and the first edition of the Mendelssohn concerto. So what we play today of the Mendelssohn concerto was actually due to Ferdinand David's influence and many of his suggestions to Mendelssohn. So the thing that was really interesting about Ferdinand David, he was a very versatile musician. He's the kind of guy that I really admire tremendously because he didn't just play the violin, he wasn't just a soloist. He was a concertmaster, he was a conductor himself. He wrote for a lot of different instruments. As you said, he wrote very famous trombone concerto, probably the most famous trombone concerto. And of course he wrote this concertino, and he wrote quite a number of other works for winds. Okay, so now tell me, when you play this concertino, what kind of form, what kind of style is it, kind of? You know, what's it loosely based on?
well, at around the time period that he wrote it, it's around the Romantic era.
Yeah.
So I would have to say that it's more romantic, more emphasized on expressing yourself as the soloist.
That's so true. What I'm trying to get at is, for instance, where's your little cadenza here?
I have the
Here's
solo
this one?
starts right here.
Well, this is the cadenza, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so we have the cadenza. And how would you characterize some of the thematic material?
Kind of like how a violin would play it.
How about the next level up above that?
I don't know.
The human voice. The human voice. This is very loosely based on operatic style, you know? So everything you're playing really is more like bel canto, you know, Bellini, Donizetti, people like that. You know, this is more operatic. Many violinists of the time and many composers of the time, Hummel and people like that, I'm sure you play pieces by Hummel, right?
Yes.
They all loosely based their stuff in a very operatic style. Yeah? So if you know who Louis Spohr was, he was a very famous violinist and composer, conductor. In fact, he was the guy who invented the chin rest, and he is also the guy who invented the baton, of all things. Louis Spohr, never forget that guy, he was revolutionary. And Spohr wrote several pieces for violin and octets and things like that were all loosely based in operatic form. So can you think of these lyrical lines like you're a great baritone, you know, or in your higher register like a great tenor, and breathe like a tenor and shape like a tenor, yeah? So that it doesn't wind up getting grounded. That's one of the things I noticed. You're a wonderful player, but sometimes it gets kind of plotty and grounded. Yeah, and on a bassoon, you know, that can be a little bit deadly, right? If it's a little grounded. So think about that. And when you play your little cadenza here, make it more flourishy, like a well, I don't want to say like a coloratura soprano, because this is what you're doing, but it should have that kind of feeling of filigree and, you know, quite coquettish in a way. And I like very much what you did here, except that what about these articulations here? Can I hear you just play from here? Da 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 dee, da 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 dee.
All right.
So Stuart, here's one of the things that I'm missing, and that is, I can't tell that you're playing triplets or duplets. So you're playing ba 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 da da dee Da, 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 da. There it's clear that it's a triplet. But you have to play da, ba, ba, dee, da, da, dee. You got to really make sure you show me the triplet so that it would go, otherwise it sounds like two 16th notes. Da, ba, 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 da, da, dee. Yeah, and then when you get to the triplet, I'm going, that's not related. Is that notated differently? Yeah? And we're playing triplets all the time, right? The triplet is what is pretty much, right, it's sort of the, what do I want to call it? The narrative. The triplet is all over the place, right? Yeah, when you have the duple, you've got to make sure that the triplet is really accurate so that you can really tell the difference between a duple and a triplet. Yeah, especially when you're tugging. Ba, 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 beep. Make sure you spread them out and make sure you don't rush the separated ones. Yeah, all of these. Yeah, it's very important. Okay, well, why don't you play from the beginning one more time? Yeah, see, sounds very, very grounded to me. If you were singing it, you wouldn't go da, dee, da, da, da. See what I mean? Dee, dee, da, da. Yeah. Imagine you're a tenor, you need about another 300 pounds on you. But, you know, if you're, you know what I mean? Can you make it sound like that? Nice. Yeah. So here's one thing you can do here, is when you play your D, is let it grow a little bit. What do you call that? From the G to the F. What is that called in music?
It's not, I guess it wouldn't be a leading tone, although
No.
it is leading. All right.
Leading tone's always the note underneath, generally. Let's call it an appoggiatura. Have you ever heard of an appoggiatura?
Like,
Huh?
yes.
Yeah, Mozart uses it all the time, right? He uses appoggiaturas. It's usually the note above before the resolution. Tira, da, ya, da, dee, dee, da, ya, da, dee, da, tira. So you put a little bit of emphasis on the G. Da, ya, da, tira, and then you release on the F. See what I mean? Tira. All right, let's try that. Think about that. You see, loosely, if you just read the notes, it's just like anything else. You know, you could read, for instance, you know, I'm sure I could recite Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, but believe me, I could never have the impact when I recite it the way he did, yeah? I mean, the I Have a Dream speech is an incredible speech because, not just because it's a great speech, but it's because of the way he delivered it, yeah? So it's the same thing here. You have notes on the page. These are like words. You can say them any number of ways, yeah? But you got to say them compellingly to your audience, yeah? And so you've got to know what these words mean. You got to know what the structure is and what notes to emphasize, which notes have tension in them, when to release them a little bit, you know? So that's part of knowing the structure. If you know how the piece is built, then you can start to shape it and give it some drama. Okay? So let's try it one more time. Yeah, can you really start that D so it's beautiful the instant you come in, huh? That ba, teen, teen. Yeah, that's too much. Now you gotta lead to it. Yeah, just lead to it and don't make it choppy. Yeah, can you lead a little bit more into the G and not ta-dum, but it's ti-dum. Imagine that G has a line on it. Da-ya-da-ti-dum. And there's a little decay on it, yeah, after you play it. All right, one more time. That's better. Now let's play a little bit.
From the beginning?
Yeah, why not? I'm enjoying it. Now hold on. Let's do one more thing. Okay? Now tell me something. How many of you can see what he's doing on the bassoon? Guess what? You see, there wasn't anybody who raised their hand. Now, let's try something a little different. Okay, now play and make sure, yeah, your bell should be out there, but can you play so that people can actually see what you're doing? Yeah, they need to see your hands, they need to see your expression, they have to see your concentration level, they got to see your posture, you know? I mean, part of the experience of a bassoon, which is not a typical solo instrument, you got to let people see what you're doing, you know? Not everybody knows what a bassoon even is, right? Right? Even this is a little too far over. Okay, how about let's try it. Now let's give everybody a chance to see what you're doing. Here, now look. Yeah, it's a little different this time, huh? Can you bring this down a little bit more so we hear the difference? Yeah, we got to hear that, yeah? Because it's a little different than the first time. It's not repeated. Yeah, let's do just a little bit before, like the bar before. All right, let's do da 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 da. Right. What is the surprise note there?
What is the surprise note?
It's that E natural, right? All of a sudden, it's like the E natural is a big surprise. Yeah, it doesn't fit into the harmonic structure like the first time. The first time is very conventional, isn't it? Yeah, and the second time with that E natural, it changes the convention a little bit. It just makes it whoa. It's like your ear gets attracted to it. So make them go, ooh, cool. That's different. Yeah, don't just play it, but make them listen to you.
From there?
Yeah, play the same place. Da dee da da. Okay, now let's play your first D. Play your very first note. Okay, now that D, it fluctuates because when you play it later, twice more. Yeah, here, this D is very different than this D. And you gotta make sure that you stay consistent with your intonation. Huh? Also, your F sharp is quite low. The F sharp just above that D. Can you play that F sharp? Can you adjust that to the D? Ah, you see? It's a hair sharp, isn't it? So what am I doing here? Why did I play that D for you?
So I could play it flatter because when you're playing the third, you have to lower it 14 cents.
That's exactly, well, it's on sale, yeah. And then the other thing is that you've got to have relative pitch, yeah? So that you play harmonically exactly the right pitch. So when you play the D and you play, the F sharp should be related to the D here, yeah? So you were playing a little sharp before. All right, and the, let's hear your little cadenza now. Yeah, can you bring that out a little bit more so you really hear the lower notes of that? It's kind of getting scrambled a little bit.
Yeah, it's...
Can you try that?
Like crescendo into, because I have a...
Clarity.
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 Okay.
Yeah, it's a little better, but it's still a little bit shaky. Now the other thing is, what about tonguing? You know what? Do you have enough wind for this? Ba da 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 ti. Yeah, da, 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 da. You know, if I were you, I would take a breath here, play the G, You know, hang around the G for a moment. Yeah, I'm sure the orchestra's probably hanging on there, right? Yeah, right? Am I right or from
No, you're right. You're right.
I don't know the piece. I know the piece, but I'm assuming, knowing the structure already, that there's probably something hanging around there, so you can take the breath without any problem. Right there. Take a little time on the F. D has to be a little more vocal. In other words, it's got to be a little more corny. You know, that bel canto. You know, bel canto was not dramatic. It was melodramatic. It was like a soap opera. You know, there's always. You know, the plots were always very, convoluted plots. You know, some maid finds a handkerchief in the foyer and then says, oh, well, my mistress must be seeing so-and-so, who's the brother of my cousin's third, whatever, and therefore there must be something going on, and then she creates intrigue, and then there's nothing but confusion and, as we say in Spanish, locura, just like insane stuff happening. Yeah? So here, I think you could take a little time here after the F. So let's try one more time. I like that with the breath. You sound stronger after that. You don't feel like you're running out of gas at the bottom of that. Huh?
Thank you, you too.
Part of that question is a loaded question, because the minute you assume or think or act as if you're at the top all the time, you're already behind the 8 ball. Because, our profession is not simply geared to being at the top. In many ways it's like religion. It's a discipline. It's a lifelong pursuit of how you live your life. And so I use a lot of quotes with my students, and I'm very inspired by so many writers and athletes and people who have said things regarding this. I just recalled a quote from T.S. Eliot, who said that humility is not thinking less of yourself, but rather thinking of yourself less. And so in the pursuit of being an artist, I just try to spend most of my time thinking about how I can serve the music, how I can serve my craft, how I can serve my teachers, how it's very important to me, and maybe I'll add my lineage. Like we all have family trees, I have an unbelievable family tree in violin playing. My teacher studied with the great Eugène Ysaÿe, who was one of the giants of the late 19th century and early 20th century, a violinist and teacher, composer, conductor, pianist. He was a gargantuan musician, and he studied with Vieuxtemps. You may know Vieuxtemps, who wrote famous concertos. His teacher was Vieuxtemps, and his teacher was a man named Roberex, which very few people know, but Roberex studied with Kreutzer, and those of you who played Kreutzer etudes know who I'm talking about. And Kreutzer studied with Viotti, and we all know who Viotti was. And then Viotti studied with a man named Giovanni Battista Sommis, who studied with a man named Pugnani. Where is Raylan? Yeah, Pugnani was one of my former teachers, and Pugnani studied with Vivaldi and Corelli. So I can trace my background almost 400 years in violin playing. So if that doesn't keep you humble, if it doesn't keep you focused on what your work is, nothing will, because you're just a small cog in the progression of the art and the craft. Often people say, well, what do you want your legacy to be? And I said, I don't really have a legacy. All I'm trying to do is push forward the agendas of my former teachers and try to honor the craft. And so it's very difficult to be your very best all the time. It takes a lot of commitment, and it takes a lot of dedication. And I have to say, I think the most difficult thing about it is what it does to your personal life to be dedicated to it like this. Olympic athletes, they talk about what it takes for them to make it to the Olympics and try to be at the top and everything, but it's very temporary for them. It might be 8, 12 years. I mean, for an artist, it's a kind of a sad situation, because by the time you acquire all the knowledge that is incredibly useful to you, you're 80 or 85 years old, and then you can't play anymore. And that's kind of a bummer, because you've acquired so much experience and you've grown so much over those years, and then your body just cannot do the things that you want it to do. But it's a huge personal sacrifice to try to maintain your highest standard all the time, and it's tough on your friends, it's tough on your families, and it's tough on you, And but I enjoy the challenge, and I just keep working at it. That's all I can do. Just keep working at it, not succumb to being comfortable. The minute you're comfortable, it's over. Yeah. I have time for another one if they want to ask. That's fine. I'm not in any hurry.
All right, I have another question then. Madison asked, when you were little, did you ever want to quit? And what kept you going?
Oh boy, did I want to quit. Let me see now. There were a couple times, that I got frustrated and felt I wasn't making progress and hitting a wall. Oddly enough, I never felt that way until I was 30 years old. That's really incredible, isn't it? When I was 30 years old, I had a bit of a meltdown because I had been practicing and working so incredibly hard for 21, 22 years that I woke up one day and I just didn't want to play the violin anymore. I mean, I had given my life, given my soul to this instrument, and I had worked day and night, practiced day and night, and studied day and night, and went to competitions. And when I would win one or get a good prize in one, I'd go to the next one, and I'd study even harder and work even harder and dedicate myself even more. And finally, after 20 very, very tough years of work, I finally thought, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm just tired. And I did something very radical. I packed a very small bag, and I rented a villa in Hawaii, and I went there. And I had no intentions of coming back. And I quit my job at the University of Michigan. I was teaching there, and I said, that's it, I'm done with this. I'll sell my instrument and retire. I don't know, play poker or something. And then I was in Maui. It was great. I ate fish and pineapple and went snorkeling. And for the first time in my life, I didn't realize what I'd given up until I was 30. And all of a sudden I had a life. And I thought, gosh, this is great. I'm actually doing what other people do. And then after about 3 months, I got this wake-up call. And I said, what are you doing on this earth? Taking up space, doing nothing, being useless. Get back home and get to work. And that's just what I needed. I needed a break from this. And so yeah, I've thought about quitting, and thought about quitting, maybe less seriously once or twice other than that. But I think it's such a tough profession to be good at, and you have to give up so much, and sometimes you don't have a good perspective. If you're very driven like I was, a very willful person, and my parents will vouch for that. And I think it's very important. I tell young people all the time, make sure you have a life. Make sure you play a little bit. make sure you get out there and play some soccer, you know, make sure you have friends, have a sleepover or whatever, you know, just make sure you mix a real life in there, because it's very easy to get sidetracked and monomaniacal with your work, and even at a young age. And when you do that, it really doesn't do you a lot of good at a certain point. And but the good side of that story is that when I came back from Hawaii, I got a phone call about a week later from a pianist in Los Angeles, and she said, "Hey, I've got good news. I just landed a recording contract with Delos Records, and they want to record our trio." And I said, "Oh, really? Yeah, great. When?" "Well, next week." And I said, "You're kidding." I said, "I haven't played the violin in 3 months." And she said, "You better hurry up and get in shape." And so I hurried up and got in shape. We made the recording. 6 months later, we won a Grammy. So it tells you I needed the break. Yeah. So it kind of tells you how important it is to get a balanced life.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Follow our website, chambermusicfw.org, for more information. We're going to do this again several times. Thank you for making this a success, and thank you to our guest musicians.
Yeah. Good job. Good job. Good job.